Good evening, everybody. My name is Nick Tuppen. I'm the CEO of Threshold Sports, and it's great to welcome you all to our second Q&A for RAB 2022. This one is going to be focusing all about life on the ride. It's great to see a really healthy number of people dialing in for this. It's usually a great sign. The more people we get on these, the better prepared we are when we get to the actual ride. Before we start, very quick bit of kind of Zoom admin. I assume all of you know your fire exits and toilets where you're dialing from. But on the technical side, please stay on mute, but add any questions you want onto the chat and the Facebook comments, and we'll go through those at the end or try and integrate them as we go along. So we have our core team here this evening. So we've got Andy Cook, our route director, who looks after effectively everything when you guys are on the road. You will curse and praise him in equal measure as the ride progresses. We also have Karen Hannaford. Karen is our event director. Effectively, she looks after everything when you're off the bike, so all the things to do with base camps. Unfortunately, she is on the back end of quite a nasty cough at the moment, so rather than remove all credibility from her hygiene slides, I'm going to be picking up most of those sections this evening, but she's online for anything, any specifics which I can't pick up. We've also got Sophie, who runs all the comms team at Threshold as well, so she's going to be there picking up the detail about what you can expect in the next few months in the run-up to the main event come September. Before we get into it, just want to take a step back and reflect on the challenge that you've undertaken, especially for those of you who are dialing into this session or a kind of RAB webinar session for the first time. It's likely that you will be feeling nervous. There'll be butterflies when you start thinking about the ride and what you signed up to. You kind of feel the heart rate beginning to pick up, the nerves, the stomach churning. That is normal. If you weren't feeling nervous about taking on a challenge like this, would be more worried than if you were. So we see that as a good thing. And simply put, you're feeling nervous because you decided to do something bold and something extraordinary and something which is scary and something that requires real sacrifice to be able to complete it as well. It is an extraordinary journey that we're going to go on together. And when you look at some of the stats which are involved, it's clear why. So when you look at the stats on the slide, so you can click on one slide, the challenge we've got is 980 miles in 9 days. And when you look at a lot of the challenges that people sign up to, cycle events, things like that, you take something like Ride London, that's 100 miles over 1 day. We're going to be doing that day after day beyond that distance and kind of tougher elevations. So the sheer duration in terms of distance and time is unique. We'll be going through 3 countries, over 23 counties, all different landscapes, over 52,000 feet of elevation. For context, that's just shy of a couple of Everests. You'll also have 1,000 riders taking on this journey alongside you, as well as over 150 crew looking after you. And the thing that makes this magic is every single one of those riders and every single one of those crew members is unified in that single aim of trying to get everyone to John O'Groats. And that is what makes it a very, very special experience. But actually, beyond simply that element of all targeting, completing that journey on our way up to John O'Groats, the impact of the ride itself is far, far greater than just on those 1,000 riders, you guys and the crew looking after you. When you look at the fundraising stats and the impact this event has from that side, every single time we ride out of that base camp, we'll be raising the best part of £150,000 for charity. So these charity partners here, but also others not listed there, they need money more than ever at the moment. And your efforts, which you're putting in now already in the preparation, has the ability and has proven to just change countless lives beyond this bubble of riders on the live event. It's just one of these things that makes it a very, very special experience. Ultimately, we're going to complete this together. We'll train together. We're going to be nervous together. We'll ride it together. We're going to dig deep together. And also when we get to that finish line, we're going to celebrate together. This challenge has been inspiring people for over 120 years. Basically, the minute people started making bicycles, they started looking at Land's End John O'Groats and riding between it. Even after a decade of us running this event and seeing the people come through every year, the team at kind of Threshold and the wider team who help us deliver it, it still has that same magic of the first year we did it, because we know the impact it has on the riders and the excitement of the journey we go on. But this evening is not about me getting overexcited about the ride itself. You guys are already signed up for this. So before any other stuff from me, I'm going to hand over to Andy for the first bit of this evening, which is talking about the route and what you can expect when you're actually on your bike on the ride.
Thank you very much, Tups. Good evening, everyone. What we thought we'd do with this slide is just give you a little bit of the background of what actually goes into to planning this whole amazing adventure that you've agreed to undertake. The route is driven 3 times in the year. We'll go and drive it in April time to make sure that the route that we've chosen has been completely risk assessed. Every single junction has been risk assessed. Send off a very detailed set of route notes to local authority just to make sure that they're fully aware of what's going on. After the April drive, we'll then do another drive in August time, just before we set off in September. And that's really our dynamic risk assessment, just to make sure that everything is as we expect it to be and we haven't got to make any last minute changes. We're constantly tweaking the route year on year. Tups has just said that we've been running this event for, I think it's 12 years ago we started the first one. So we're always trying to make changes. The route signage itself, you can see a lovely picture there of the arrows. You'll get very familiar with those. We'll put thousands and thousands of those up the day before. It's another opportunity for our route team to feedback any changes that might have happened, any unnecessary roadworks that have sprung up, and they'll complete that. We put signs up. One will go up before a junction. That's a warning sign. We'll put one up on the junction itself for the actual turn, and then we'll put one after the junction, the confirmation. Many people will often say, you'll have seen it on social media, that you don't actually need your Garmin's because the arrowing is so good. So it's just another little extra that you get on this ride, of course. A lead car will go out in the morning that will make sure before anyone else is out there, take any spare signs just in case any have been tampered with overnight. So that's our last check. So you can see the thoroughness that goes into making sure that the route is as we expect it to be. So that's the other little bit of addition. There's a signage down team, of course. We pride ourselves on making sure that none of the signs are left up, although obviously now and again some get left behind and they're often taken down for souvenirs. But generally we try and make sure that all the signs are down as well. There's a broom wagon. We'll have 2 broom wagons out there. You don't want to get into the broom wagon, but it of course might be needed should there be an incident that you need picking up or something untoward in terms of mechanical. So those are there. And the big broom wagon, it will meet the small broom wagon at the feed station, so you're not going to be cramped up in a small little minibus all day long if you've had the unfortunate situation where you've had to be picked up. It's not the best place to be at the best of times. An incredible team of mechanics come onto the ride. There'll be mobile mechanics, and they'll also be at the pit stops, and they'll be at the start and the finish. The key message often from the mechanics is to make sure that you get your bike sorted out. If you've had a little niggle during the day or something's gone on with your bike, make sure that you go straight in and get it sorted, and you don't leave it till the following morning to go and get it sorted when they're going to be extremely busy getting other bikes mended and sorted out. Spares are charged at cost, but labour's free, so they will get you back on the road, and they carry spare bikes for anything that's a little bit terminal. The only one thing that they will often ask is that you bring a rear gear mech hanger and specific spokes. If you've got specific wheels, you've got and a rear mech hanger. They're made to actually break. They're sacrificial. So look into your local bike shop and go and sort of source those before you come to the event. There's a very excellent event control system that's set up. So you can see on that picture there that the 2 riders in the middle, they've got numbers on the front of their bikes. That identifies them, but also on there is 2 phone numbers. One that goes through to if you're lost off route or if you've got a mechanical issue. But perhaps the more important one of those 2 numbers is the one that goes through and will get the medical support out to you. So it's really important that you make sure that you have those perhaps already in your phone and get those sorted out. The medical support is like the mechanical support, it's mobile, so it can get out to you once we know where you are. And also it will be stationed at the pit stops and also at the start and finish. If there's any absolutely desperate emergency, then obviously we ring 999 straight away. I think Karen may have been going to talk a bit about the base camp doctor. There's a doctor at the base camp as well. And then the other asset that we've got out on the route is the safety bikes, and we deploy the safety bikes if there's any incidents out on the route during the day, any other things that we've found that need a little bit of extra support with our with the safety bikes. And then the last bit of support there is the chaperones. You can see the guy on the left in that middle picture, and they form or fulfill three roles really. That one is to sort of police the front group. Often we'll find that the front group, they sort of tend to be the faster guys who perhaps ride a little bit irresponsibly at times. So the front guys, the front chaperones will be there just to make sure they stay in order and don't bring the ride into disrepute. But the majority of the chaperones are there to help create groups and instill the group riding etiquette and set a pace that's sustainable for the whole ride. And then there'll be a few chaperones that will be at the back of the ride, and they're there to encourage and help those people who are struggling at the back. Most of these chaperones are experienced club riders. Many of them have ridden this event many times. They do it because they love helping and making sure that you guys get through the ride itself. So that's that slide done. I'll move on to the next one. This is an element that we introduced to the ride, the strike system. And it came about primarily as a safety feature, and it's for everybody, as the slide says, not just the riders, but also for the staff. And we found in year one when we were running this, admittedly it was in June, so we were experiencing some nice weather and it was light at night. But what we found is that we were looking after a very small minority of riders, and we'd have broom wagons, we'd have medical support, we'd have mechanical support, we'd have the ride director, we'd have chaperones who often that first year weren't getting until gone 10 o'clock at night. And they've got to be fed and watered, and we have a duty of care to everybody. So it's really important that people understand what the reason the strike system is and why it's there. We will, if there's any undue circumstances during the day, we'll talk with the health and safety team, and dispensation may be granted for an extension to the hours that we need you in by. But generally, if you've trained well for this event, you have plenty of time to get in. The key part of this is to not linger at the feed stations, not to be fearful of this system. As I said, it's there for a reason. Pace yourself, make sure you leave early. We also run a fast track system. So if anyone we recognize on day one is really struggling, we can put a little sticker on your bike if you come in after the closing time, and we will then make sure that you're at the start of the ride the following morning, providing you with absolute every opportunity to make it in time. All strikes will be wiped out at the end of day 8, because once we've got to Bonner Bridge, then you've only got one way to go, and that's to the finish. And the other thing to put people's mind at rest is some mornings we start a bit earlier, so there is, as I said, plenty of time for you to complete each day's ride if you've trained well. Everyone involved with this event, Tupp said this earlier, everyone wants you to succeed, and we will all do absolutely everything we can to make sure that's the case. So
can I just chip in on that one, Andy? I think it's probably one of the most important things, because it's, like I say, it's something which people worry about, and we definitely want people to realise that this, like you say, is something intended to help people get there. And these things we put in place, like the sticker system, to fast track people towards the front of the ride so they can get off early. These are all things which we've introduced to support people to get through. And we're also looking this year as well for those people who come in towards the back of the ride. They've been out there in some cases for 4, 5, 6 hours longer than some of those fastest riders. So we're looking at ways of making sure maybe those people who come in late have tents right near the showers and things like that, so they're not at the back. So everything we do is trying to help everybody get there. And what we ask as well, we talk about the role of the chaperones, but ultimately there's 1,000 riders here, and everyone has the ability to help the person next to them get there. So if we get the tone right, we get the systems right, and as a group of people we all buy into this, that's when we find that positive reinforcement. And by the end of it, you'll see even people who've kind of learned the trader group riding on the event, bringing in groups of 5 and 10, and that's what we try and do with things like the strike system, is support people to get there. It's not something you should fear, it's there to support you.
Cheers, Tupp. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about training and nutrition. And it's an interesting one because the food on this event is so incredible in terms of the amount. Many riders go back heavier than when they started. People often think they're going to lose weight on this event because you're burning an incredible amount of calories each day. But the opportunity at the pit stops and also at the base camps to eat well and to eat nutritious food is outstanding. And the key message there is that, some riders will be very clued up on their sports nutrition, and they may be more used to performance riding and understand clearly what it is they need in their bodies in terms of the amount of calories and the amount of calories that are going out. And then there are other riders that are far less clued up. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that you don't feel the need to necessarily go one way or the other. It's entirely down to you. Ultimately, you know your body, you know what you like best. There's some great stuff at the feed stations, savory stuff like pork pies, like crisps when you're craving salt, which is equally good for your body compared to having to necessarily stomach sports nutrition. The other thing I would say about sports nutrition, High Five are extremely generous. They're a fantastic sponsor of this event. Use it, get used to it before the event, because if you come to the event and you suddenly start taking the sports nutrition, it doesn't agree with you, then that's not a great place to be. So the balancing science in motion was, if you feel like you want to eat a pork pie or go into the chip shop as you're passing by, then that's absolutely fine. Don't feel compelled to necessarily take on sports nutrition. However, if you are of a mind to use the sports nutrition, it is there. I think that's the important point for me. I think the other thing is to make sure that you're having a very balanced diet leading up to the event in your training, as well as making sure that you are taking on during each day. So when I talk about the rides, lots of people, and I've seen it on social media already, rather than thinking about it as 9 days, 980 miles, think about each day, break it down into 9 days, forget about the other 8 days, just think about day one, and then break day one down into 3 35-mile little chunks essentially, and just think about riding a 35-mile ride, having a stop, taking on some energy, and then riding again. And if you can ride at a pace that's sustainable, then you'll have no problem at all. And one of the things I often say is ride at a pace that's comfortably hard, not hardly comfortable. And that would be a level of intensity where you're burning some carbohydrate, but you're burning fat as well. And so it's important that you take on the calories that you need, but don't overdo it at the same time. And one of the most important things you can do is when you're finished a training session, but also when you finish each day's ride, is to get the carbohydrates straight back into your body. High Five supply us with protein powder, which you can take as soon as you get in. You'll find that distribution point pretty quickly, I'm sure, and get that made up and get that down here, because it helps you recover to start again the next day when you start all over again. So that's the bit on training nutrition. We've got some more webinars later on scheduled where we'll go into that in a bit more detail.
Okay. Great, thanks, Andy. This is where I have to pick up from Karen's notes. So if my phone starts buzzing in the background, it means I'm missing out critical points. So apologise if I have to loop around on a couple of these things. So the next bit is just talking about the life off the bike, which is a fundamental part of this ride compared to some of the other things you might have been training. And we want to give you a flavour of what is in and around the base camps, what you can expect. But in reality, I think one of the things people do when they arrive down in Land's End is they kind of stare slightly open-mouthed at the scale of the setup and the provision which is there. So clearly Karen has been historically very modest about what she does on this part of the ride, because it is a massive operation to feed, carry all this gear, get everyone set up with everything you guys need to take you on every single day. So the actual base camps are fields and race courses, and we have all the stuff you need when you arrive in base camp. So the first thing is when you ride in, you'll be guided towards your bike racking. So that is open bike racking area within the site, which is manned by a security team. So you'll be able to go in, leave your bike there. You can gain access to your bike back and forth between when you take it out the next morning. But each time you go in and out of that secure bike racking area, the security team will check your number and no one walks out of that bike racking area, unless the bike matches the number, their rider number, which will be on their wrist as well. So you don't need to bring a lock or anything like that. Some people bring saddle covers and things like that because it is out in the open air, but it's very secure. After you've racked your bike, the next thing you'll probably notice around the camping. So you can see that image there on the left of all the tents. They're all single occupancy, and the good news is those are set up ready for you. So there's no putting up or taking down of those tents. They're all numbered in colour zones, which is how we run the base camps, and you'll be allocated a colour onto the event. You do, however, need to bring a sleeping bag and a camping mat. On that side, there's no one-size-fits-all view on the right style of sleeping bag or camping mat. This is probably introducing a theme which I think is really important, is work out what is important to you. So some people will happily lie almost on the ground in a bivvy. They love camping, and they'll sleep like a baby all the way through. Others, where camping might be a bit more unfamiliar, this is where you would start to bring in maybe a slightly thicker mattress, an air mattress, and things like that, which might take a little bit more time to inflate. But once it's in your tent, if you're getting a good night's sleep, again, it's another thing which is going to increase your chance of finishing the ride. So in terms of sleeping bags, it can get cold up in Scotland, and regularly does. So it's got down to below freezing at times. So we'd recommend at least a 3-season sleeping bag. But what quite a few people do is you might get like a thermal liner in there as well, which means if it is warm, and we are blessed with glorious sunshine, you don't necessarily need an Arctic standard sleeping bag. You've got a bit of flexibility to move between it, but you should be, if Scotland decides to be on the chillier side, then yeah, it can get down to kind of freezing. It's done in the past up towards the north of Scotland. So yeah, not underestimating some warm stuff for the evenings. The other stuff on site, obviously got all the loos, we've got hot showers, which we'll provide a fresh towel for you every single day. It is really important that, this is a classic example of where we need to work in partnership with you guys. Most people are fantastic. They take one towel and it's dropped off straight after the showers, and we get those ready, and we've got enough with a small contingency on top of that. But in the past, we've found people taking 3-4 towels. Very simply on this ride, we can put in a healthy contingency, but if you kind of take other people's stuff, you are literally taking it from other people. So if you're the kind of person who likes to towel themselves off with one towel, another one around the head, another one for your legs, we just request that you bring your own additional towels rather than taking someone else's. But yeah, we provide one for you every single day. We also have a pamper area, which is surprisingly well used, with various mirrors, hair dryers and straighteners for men and women who like to look their best in the evenings. But I would stress, it is not a fashion show. I think some of the images are hard to shake that I've seen on RAB, almost more so in the warm weather with shorts, hard to pull off at the best of times. But it's really not a fashion show, but we have got stuff there for those people who want to look their best. In terms of the dining, we have a big central dining area, big marquee with this amazing caterer. Andy's alluded to this before. People tend to come along and put on weight rather than lose weight. So they have this incredible ability to conjure up this fantastic food night after night. There is a full range there as well. And there is provision for vegetarians and vegans and other kind of dietary requirements. The important thing is you tell us beforehand on all the registration forms and things like that, so we can account for that. But yeah, fantastic food every night. It's one of the highlights of the ride for riders and crew alike. We also have laundry 3 times during the event for your cycling kit only. We know cycling kit can get expensive, so we actually bring a laundry system in, which allows you to turn that stuff over. It does have limits on, it's all kind of listed out in the detail around the laundry, limits the amount of stuff you can put in those, primarily around the drying setup. So if you do try and chuck all your stuff in, a load of extra things as well, there won't actually be space for your things to dry in the drying system. So we do just ask you to kind of follow the guidelines on that, but it allows you to reuse the same kit you go through. We also have a drying room for every wet kit, for your wet kit. if it rains. So again, that goes in and you hang that all up yourself. And this is one of the first things you realize it's critical to label all your stuff. So things like black bib shorts, trying to trawl through 800 pairs of those to find your own is, not great at the best of times. But yeah, labeling all your stuff is really, really important. And same goes, we have a charging area for phones, Garmin's, lights, things like that as well. So labeling your stuff with your name and rider number is absolutely critical. And they're just sensible things to do. So people with phone screensavers have something, some people put their rider number on there, or family members. So it's very unlikely you'll get them confused, even if you are tired after day 6 or 7. So we've got all that stuff on site, which you'll need to get you refreshed, recovered, and ready to go for the next day. There is a bar, actually. Kazi, you didn't mention the bar in the notes, but I know that's a fairly fundamental part of several people's recovery programs. But there is a bar every night, and that's one of the few things where that's not included. So all the food and everything's included, but if you want additional kind of alcoholic drinks and stuff in the evening, that's on usually a card basis as well. The medical and recovery. So Andy's mentioned all the medics out on the route. We also have a team of medics at the base camp each day for advice and help if you need it. And this is really, really, this is a fundamental part. We talk about getting you guys back on your bike every single day, and they are brilliant, brilliant experienced team who'll be there to look after you. We also have our team of sports therapists who are there for more serious aches and pains. And our priority is making sure those people who need to be seen most get the attention first. First off, last year, due to COVID measures, we had to move away from the massage team, and instead we replaced that with guided stretching and yoga. As it is, the feedback from the previous year is that every day having guided stretching and yoga is far better for your ability to finish. We've got a guy who will be going around helping you deal with specific aches and pains. The feedback on that, as much as it is a nice luxury, again, for crew and riders alike, we're going to stick with the yoga and guided stretching for this year as well. We'll send a full medical kit list for the things you might need as well on the ride, just the basic bits and pieces as well. But we've got all the critical stuff, so the doctors, the medics, all the sports therapists, they're the fundamentals of keeping you on the ride. And then we'll have this guided stretching and yoga area on site every night. Next one is around luggage. So, one of the things doing this ride versus one where you might be self-supporting is you don't have to carry all of that gear. However, what we don't recommend is bringing your entire wardrobe from home. What we find is there are some fundamental things you want in base camp, and the rest of it, you may well not get it out of your bag. So we've refined the packing list year after year to the really important things. Basically, it's keeping you warm, dry, and keeping the amount you bring to a minimum. Wearing the same tracksuit bottoms for 9 evenings is entirely acceptable. You don't have to change for regional dress or anything as we go further up the country. And actually, the less you bring, the easier it is. You don't want to be picking between these things. It's actually a real treat just to be going, right, this is the warm kit I've gone, chuck it on, and off you go, and you go and get your dinner. People actually quite often people bring extra food, and invariably that gets packed every single day in their tent, taken to the luggage truck every single day, taken out the next day, carried back around the base camps and taken all the way home. If you have very specific requirements and needs, then obviously you can bring stuff, you can put whatever you want in your bag. I do remember one person having a special delivery. I think this guy was in his 50s, but his mum delivered some elderflower cordial to one of the base camps midway up the country. You don't need it because there is more than enough stuff there. But equally, if there's something which is really important to you, even if it's just a mood booster for you, it's fine to put it in your bag, but less is more on that one. Another thing you'll realize is lots of people kind of start packing and repacking their bag from around June onwards. And they'll pack it and repack it furiously in the few days in the run up to the event before eventually leaving home and heading down to to Land's End. What you find is you will probably try and pack everything in beautifully into your bag on the first day. You'll take it all out in Land's End. You'll probably be able to pack it in because you'll wake up quite early because of all the nervous anticipation on day one. But by the time you get to day 3 or day 4, you'll be looking at the stuff you've packed, wondering how it's expanded by about 20% and it doesn't fit in your bag anymore. So if in doubt, buy a slightly larger bag and don't fill it, because you don't want to be having to pack with military efficiency every single day in the confines of your tent. And the final thing to say about your bag is absolutely 100%, if you can, get a waterproof bag, or at the very least have get bin bags on the inside of an existing bag, because what you don't want is we can't keep the bags dry every single minute of every single day. Grass is dewy, grass is damp, even if you just put it down outside your tent before you get in. You don't want to be getting damp sleeping bags, damp kit and things like that. So a waterproof bag is definitely a good suggestion. It would also, again, putting the fashion piece to one side, the more colourful the better, because when you're looking to find your bag amongst a group of them, having the black waterproof bag is not going to be the way which is quickest to get to your tent and changed afterwards, whereas the discounted, no one else wants it, bright orange or bright yellow or polka dot bag is probably the quicker bet to get it at the end of each day. Baggage allowance, I think the baggage allowance is 16 kilograms, and trust me, having done this, that is enough for, I'm 6'2", so my kit's relatively large, and it was fine to get it into that amount. And even then, there are a couple of things which I didn't use. However, if you want to get your bigger inflatable mattress, you want to pack your pillow or anything like that, we do put in an extra luggage allowance. We don't want this to become like Ryanair, where you're charging for everything as you go along. But the reality is, if everyone chucks in an extra 5-10 kgs, we end up having to transfer tons and tons of luggage extra every single day. And if we don't have the facility for that, we get into real difficulty. So that's why we put that in place. And we do genuinely feel you should be fine with that existing allowance with the core stuff we've suggested. So that's the main elements on luggage. A quick just run through on the RAB Plus package. So some of you guys will be on this one. I won't go through loads of detail because it's not going to be relevant to everyone, but you will be shuttled off to hotels in the evening, usually 2 or 3 different ones. We try and keep the traveling distance to a minimum, but depending where you are in the country, some of those journey times are slightly longer, especially up in the Highlands. Your main bags we take to the hotel, but you'll have a day bag which can come to you to the base camp, which is where you'll finish riding each day, so you can get a change of clothes, get some food, things like that. The shuttles run on a timetable which you can book into, and then in the morning all the riders come back at the same time, ready for the start. Like I said, I'm not going to, for the purposes of this one, we won't go through all the specific details of that, but obviously any questions you've got, any specifics, please do get in touch. And actually thinking about it, Sophie, it's probably quite useful to do a Plus specific webinar. Would be helpful for those guys, because there's a bit more detail in there we might want to bring in. So next bit to kind of bring it to life for you is the timings. The arrival down in Land's End is going to be from 2 p.m. on the Friday, and day to day the route time is usually from 6:30 or 7 a.m. That we actually open the route each day, and that depends on the mileage, weather, and if we think it's worth bringing that forward a little bit. We don't do it as a default because we want people time to relax, recover. We don't want to be hauling you guys out of bed any earlier than we need to. The reality is most of you will wake up by yourselves, but we also have a musical alarm of some questionable choices depending on your taste, which will get you up in the morning as well. And breakfast is served from when that goes on, which I think is from 6 a.m. I'm looking for a nod from Karen. Breakfast time is served from 6 in the morning. Also from 6, the luggage trucks will be open there. So what will happen is you'll be able to get up, get ready, get all your things prepared. Some people will go and have breakfast, come back, brush their teeth, and then drop their luggage off. Some people get everything done straight away, go straight from the dining marquee onto the bikes. You will find your own rhythm to that. One thing, as you can see from that picture, we would suggest is do not drop your bag at the luggage track until you are absolutely certain you've got what you need. We've had people chuck their bags on the bottom of the luggage truck without their cycling shoes, without their helmets, gloves, all kinds of things. And it is a real challenge to get all that stuff pulled off the trucks again. So my advice would be, don't get it on the luggage truck until you are top to toe wearing exactly what you need to get on the bike. Then obviously you're out on the road all throughout the day, stopping at the pit stops. We open the sites at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We have to move an enormous amount of kit up the country, overtaking you as we go. And with the best will in the world, we can't always get everything ready earlier than that, as much as we try. The main message, if you're one of the faster riders, is you do not need to rush. As much as Karen lays on a belting base camp experience, I think from 2 o'clock onwards is enough to really take in all the all the benefits of it. And so we just ask you don't get there until 2 o'clock. So if you're a fast rider, don't try and be the first person over the line necessarily, or potentially find a couple of stops along the way, extended coffee stop or anything like that. The 2 o'clock cutoff for opening up base camp is usually fine for most people. But yeah, if we get people getting there at kind of 1:30 or something like that, we usually politely ask if people can help with luggage and things like that, which a surprising number do. But yeah, the base camp's open from 2 o'clock onwards. We then have at the base camp an afternoon tea, dinner from 5:30 till 9. We usually have an evening briefing at 8 o'clock as well. We try and get as many people along to that evening briefing as possible. It's a great chance to get everyone together, update on the ride, talk about the route the next day, tell some of the stories of the people who are taking part as well. So it's a great moment. We bring everyone together. But equally, we know some people will be absolutely exhausted, want to go straight to bed. So we'll email out the key information as well, or if people are off site. So we'll make sure it's covered off. But it's great to get people to those briefings if we can. And effectively sleep and repeat for 9 days up the country until you get to John O'Groats and get your medal. So it sounds simple. What we usually find is the people find their stride in the base camp and they get used to their routine and things like that. We've got a few top tips to make the best of it. But there is a bit of kind of back and forth, but having everything on site makes things as easy as possible. So the final piece is hygiene measures to go through. This is a really fundamental one for the ride. We talk about the kind of need, the desire to complete the ride, and ultimately everything we do is there to give you the best chance of completing that ride. And the actual physical ability to complete the distance each day is one part of it, but actually living together as a group of 1,000 people for 9 days in close proximity brings with a whole extra set of challenges, even pre-COVID. So in terms of COVID measures, everything is looking positive, on track to have a lot less restrictions than we had previously. Obviously, we're keeping a close eye on that, and whenever, whatever happens come September, we'll be running the ride in accordance with any government guidelines at the time. The fact that we're able to deliver the ride successfully last year should hopefully give people real confidence that barring something really extreme in the trajectory of the virus, we should be in a good position to do it for next year. In terms of what we actually have on the ride, we have hand sanitizer around all the toilets, food services, all those key points where there's transmission of kind of hand to mouth microbes and things like that. That's something we've been doing over the past kind of 10 years. We were kind of digging the hand sanitizer well before COVID meant everyone else caught up. The way we do that, it's a fundamental part of it. We have hand sanitizer everywhere. The key element is encouraging people to use that. Examples like removing gloves at pit stops. If you think your gloves are those contact points, hand, mouth, sometimes very occasionally you see people going into the toilets without taking their gloves off and things like that, which are frightening when they then start going to pit stops. So we've always been really, really clear on the rider responsibility, and we'll have signs at all the pit stops and all the food service areas about removing gloves and hand sanitizing. We're going to be more militant on that this year, despite having more sanitizing measures in place than ever before on the ride. We did have a DOV outbreak last year, which unfortunately took down certain members of the peloton, which is a real shame. But this year we're going to have more all the same sanitising facilities. We're also going to have more improved bottle washing facilities, but a big part of the change will be us really enforcing that and having people not letting you come up to the pit stop food unless we've seen you hand sanitize. So please don't be offended or affronted if we're asking you to wash your hands repeatedly, but it is not just for you, it's for all the other riders as well. In terms of showers and toilets, those are regularly cleaned at peak times, all the sanitizers there as well. We also have isolation areas in operation for any reported illnesses. The final point on this one is the isolation areas are only used once someone has either reported that they're ill or we've spotted them or overheard them, in some cases, having some difficulties. Rider honesty is absolutely critical in the delivery of this ride. So all we say is, please don't kind of hide and hope it's going to go away. If you're feeling under the weather, if you're not feeling good, come to the medical staff, let them know. At the very least, they'll be able to reassure you whether it's anything serious or not. But if you keep your head down and go, that doesn't feel right, if you've got a dodgy tummy or anything like that, and you try and keep it in the portalees and then go straight into the dining hall, it's not just your ride that's being affected. It can be another 10, 15, 20 people. It does spread really, really quickly despite all these measures. So we just ask, again, you'll see a familiar theme coming through this. It's about the Threshold team and the Ride Across Britain team working really closely with all the riders, and this is a really fundamental part of it. Andy talked about it on the route, obeying the highway code, helping each other out. Hygiene in the base camp is the next most important thing you can do, we can do as a group to make sure we get everyone through. And I think that is most of Karen's stuff. So hopefully I'm getting a nod. I haven't missed too much off there. And I've seen various things pinging in on the Q&A, so we'll come to those in a second. But before that, I'm going to hand over to Andy for his top tips on the road.
Cheers, Tups. Thanks very much for that. Very extensive resume of what goes on in Basecamp. This is just a few tips, and I think that, you know, I alluded earlier on when we were talking about the training and nutrition. And Tups has said the same. There are fast riders who treat it as a performance-related challenge. But I think it's fair to say that the route that's been chosen is chosen for its beauty, and it's not so much on the main roads for obvious reasons, because we want to be on those quieter roads that are less well maintained. So my advice is to not necessarily bring your 10, 12 grand race bike, you know, with carbon fiber wheels and thin, skinny tires, but perhaps to have a bike that's much more suited to comfort. And so you've got a couple of things there: mud guards, you know, saddle bag. And I'm not necessarily talking about a large saddle bag, but just making sure that you are riding a bike which is comfortable. If we get bad weather, you know, there's a fair few farms we go past. You can imagine how that has an impact if you haven't got mud guards on, and not just for yourself, but also for your fellow riders. So that's just one small part. It's your choice. I would say that there's far more people now that are riding gravel type bikes more than they are riding, you know, stripped down racing bikes, road racing bikes. The next point was the wider puncture proof tires. I've just talked about the state of some of the roads. We obviously try and make sure that we're riding on roads that are as well maintained as they possibly can be, but as I said earlier, many of them are less well maintained, so there are potholes. We do have areas, if there's particularly been rain, there will be washout from the edge of the roads, gravel, grit and stuff. So, you know, riding the best tires that you can possibly get, and maybe even making sure that you've got not turning up, as some people do with the bike they've been training on all year and they haven't had it serviced. So important to make sure that anything that you're doing with your bike is changed a good month or so beforehand, and you've given it a chance to bed in and get used to riding that bike. The other thing, of course, is to make sure, we talked about the nutrition bit a minute ago, eat and drink throughout the day. Make sure that you spread that out. I talked about that earlier on. That's the other reason for the saddlebag. Some people have large saddle packs that go underneath their saddles. Others have bags that go on their top tube. I think triathletes are particularly fond of those. It's quite a good way of filling it with your favourite nutritional, you know, goodies, whatever that might be, jelly babies, for example, and you can just unzip that, put your hand in. Cycling tops obviously got pockets in the back where you can put extra bars, gels, etc. as well. So, you know, practice all these things would be my top tip: to go out and ride some events, to make sure that you're used to drinking on the go. You'd be surprised how many people are not, making sure you can take your water bottle out, take a slug of drink, and then put your water bottle back in to your cage. Things like that are all worth practicing. The other thing that we've got a specific webinar later on in the year to talk about riding in a group and group etiquette, but I would say that it's one of the most amazing things that you can do is to learn to ride in a group, because you just chat away to people, and before you know it, you've covered off a whole big chunk of the ride that you might have been dreading, possibly because you were talking about goodness knows what. But the other thing about riding a group is that if you're sat behind the front guy, you'll be saving 30% of the energy. And I always say that cycling's about saving energy, not actually using it. So get smart and get into a nice group and ride together neatly and help each other out, which is the last point there. But don't become a slave also to the Garmin. There was a year where I tried to emphasize that point by actually having a little competition. We had a flower of the day at the evening brief that Tups has already alluded to. And we just used to get people to, the idea was for me to get people to just look up and look out and look at the views and not become a complete slave to the numbers that are on their handlebars. How far have I gone? How far am I climbing, etc., etc. Just enjoy the experience. Of course, Garmin's are important, or whatever the unit you're using, and of course it helps. But as it says there, don't fret about the numbers too much, and you'll make the most of it. You can see from that slide there, that's on the last day. That's my favourite piece of the whole route, and so that's the kind of thing you'll be seeing and looking at. And of course, the last bit, and Tups has alluded to this many times already tonight, but it's one team. We're all riding together. And you will find there will be days when you're struggling and you'll need a back wheel to sit on and someone to help you out. And if you can do the same because you're feeling a little bit stronger, or if you see someone who's struggling to mend a puncture, or they're just struggling generally and they just need a bit of cheering up, then it makes a massive difference if you can encourage each other to get to the finish. So those are some of the tips that we've sort of pulled out. There's plenty more, and we'll continue to pass those around either on social media, but also at the webinars themselves. So that's it from me, I think, tonight.
Thanks, Andy. Next one, I've got a few for Basecamp Life. This is based on, I actually had the chance to ride it back in 2017, which was brilliant, having worked on it several times. It was unfortunately, I think, the wettest we've had on record, so I'm no longer allowed to ride it in case it was a weather curse that I brought. So do not be alarmed, I'm not intending to get on the bike this year. Certain things I kind of learned from that one is we talked a bit about overpacking. You really don't need that stuff. The waterproofing of it as well is really fundamental. This is one which I'd say has become more prevalent in the last few years. I didn't think the bum bag was going to make a reappearance in the fashion pages, but I think it probably all started with RAB triggering that resurgence of the bum bag. So you'll be traveling around in Basecamp from your tent to the dining area, to the bar, maybe the dining area again, but the bar again, toilets and toothbrushing and things like that. Because you're tired, a bit like Andy said, you want to conserve energy. You don't want to be doing any more steps than you need to. And what you realise is by the time you've got your charger, your phone charger, your Garmin charger, you've got your wallet, your phone, your toothbrush, your toothpaste, your XYZ, things like that, you end up juggling all these things. So having like a bum bag, a musette, call it what you will, a man satchel, whatever that is, a small bag which you can carry around with you in Basecamp, may look unusual depending on your perspective on these things, but it's a lot better than going back and forth or trying to carry all the stuff and juggling water bottles and sachets of High Five and stuff. So something to carry all the things you need around Basecamp is super helpful. Labeling everything with your rider number, we've talked about. A lot of stuff looks the same, and so it's remarkable how little stuff goes missing. People are very honest on the ride, which is great, but equally, rather than that stuff spending a day in lost property before you're being reunited with it, label everything that comes back to you much more quickly. Look after your head. So this is one, I kind of extend this to kind of work out your weak points and make sure you treat them well. So some people can't sleep without a pillow, whatever they do. Some people will roll up a take a pillowcase and stuff it with a down jacket and they'll be out like a light. And that's great. Other people who are lighter sleepers, if you need a big feather pillow to sleep comfortably, that's fine, bring a big feather pillow. But by extension, I get very cold hands. So I bought multiple pairs of winter gloves and some very bizarre waterproof kind of lobster claw over glove things, which when you're sat at home look totally ridiculous. But when you're on the top of a long descent in Scotland and you've got them rolled up in your back pocket and you can stick those on, knowing your weak points and then counteracting them are super helpful. And the final one is if you're tall, a sleeping bin bag to put over the end of your sleeping bag, because if you're touching the edge of the tent, you're breathing heavily, it's cold outside, you begin to get condensation and things like that, and that's not much fun towards the end of the ride. So, this is 6 tips out of 600 which ex-rabbers would happily chat to you about. So the forums is a great place for this, but I would counsel thinking about what matters to you as an individual, and then think about how you can kind of make that bit easier. And that's in terms of purchasing kit or just what you bring along. I think the next bit is going to be Sophie picking up. So Sophie, you've probably maybe spoken to on the phone or received emails from. She runs all the comms for the ride internally at Threshold. So she's going to take you through what to expect over the next period on RAB from all the comms side.
Yeah, thanks, Tups. So yes, I'll be rounding off the presentation now with some information on your event preparation and the next steps that you need to take ahead of the ride. Then we will dive into any questions that you've been sending through to us on the Zoom chat and also on Facebook. So all the information you need is available on the rider information platform. That's where we have a wealth of information and informative resources, as you can see listed below. You can find the rider information platform on the FAQ page of the RAB website. We also link to the platform on all of our event emails, and we'll pop a link to the platform in the chat for you to take a look at. You can book rider and bike transport via our preferred transport provider, European Bike Express. They're experts on RAB. They've been involved on the ride for many years now, so they really do know what they're doing. We would recommend you add laundry to your package, and we are also working with a new merchandise supplier to create new RAB merch for 2022. And this will be available via the Threshold Sports webshop in early spring. We'll have more information for you on a photography service very soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. We would highly recommend you read our comprehensive kit list, which has been put together by our team of experts on RAB. And finally, we would urge you to check out our discounted partner offers from High Five and also Perkia. And just a quick reminder for those of you on the instalment payment plan that the last instalment is due on the 8th of April. So we're also here to help you get the miles in. We'll help you train for the ride. Our route director, Andy Cook, who you've heard speak earlier this evening, is hosting a training day on the 27th of February at Chippenham. Andy will also be running training camps in Mallorca in March. More information on the training day and the camps themselves is available on the rider information platform, as well as links to Andy's website and how to book. So take a look at the training and nutrition section of the platform, and I'm sure Andy would love to welcome you onto the training day and camps if you're interested. You'll have heard potentially previous riders reference the unique sense of community on the ride and the RAB bubble, which is often referred to. It's a great idea to start building this sense of camaraderie and community ahead of your arrival at the ride. So we would recommend that you join the RAB Rider Forum, which you can find on Facebook. Send a request through to us and a member of the team will admit you to the group. It's a space for current and previous riders to ask questions, share tips and advice, and just generally help each other out. We also have a Facebook page, which the team will post updates to, so you can keep your eyes peeled for any new bits of information that we can share. And you can also find us on Strava and Zwift. So finally, up and coming webinars. Next in the series of webinars for RAB 2022 will be Bike and Kit. That's towards the end of March. And that will be followed by training with a particular focus on group riding on the 28th of April. Again, at these sessions, you'll be hearing from key speakers who will be able to dive into the key aspects of the ride and share detailed information and tips. Dates and times for the lower 3 webinars, which are taking place between March and June, will be confirmed on the rider information platform very shortly. We have received many questions relating to some of the themes that you see on the screen here, and we would recommend joining these specialized webinars to hear responses to some of the questions that you have in much greater detail. So now I'll hand back to Tups, who will work through some of the questions that you've sent through to us.
Thanks very much, Sophie. That's great. I've got various questions pinging up, and so we'll probably dive straight into it, but please do keep them coming. As said on that slide, the only stupid one is the one you don't ask, so please keep them coming in. We'll start with some around base camps. So around charging areas for bike components, DI2 and power meters. So we've got charging areas in each of the base camps, which will be just based on a traditional kind of UK plug. I don't think we've got any specific areas over by the bike racking, but Karen, this might be one where I'd ask you to jump in on.
Yeah, sure. We do actually. So we have an area under a gazebo by the bike racking for anything that you can't take off your bike that needs charging. If you can get it off your bike, it's easier to take it into the main charging area, because obviously we can't provide a massive space for charging over by the bike racking area. But if you do have anything you can't take off, you can do it over there.
Thank you, Karen. Totally wrong in my summary. We're clearly getting these things up to speed. It's probably quite useful, Sophie, maybe just to make a note to check with people in advance. I know the prevalence of DI2 and electrical shifting is ramping up the whole time, so we just want to make sure we've got enough space. So if we can check with people in advance, that's probably a helpful one. We've got a question around camp beds. You can bring a camp bed. In theory, you could bring a 4-poster bed if it fitted inside your luggage and with a luggage allowance. So the short answer is, if you can fit it in your bag and it's within the luggage allowance or the additional luggage allowance you paid for, you can bring whatever sleeping equipment you require. But yeah, the kind of what we usually see is most people with an inflatable mattress, but it depends on the thickness, is what most people have. This question here about people joining at Scotland, registration and tents. This is the same process as registration, so you'll arrive on site and we'll get you registered the night before you start riding. In terms of the tent allocation, there's a couple of questions around this. We don't allocate the same kind of tent in terms of the big grid of all the tents laid out each day. What we do is it's done on arrival time. So we'll just start filling the tents as we go from riders coming along when they come across the finish line and come to the tent allocation gazebo. So people were asking about, can you camp with your kind of your friends, the people you're riding with? If you come to the tent allocation point together, you will be then given sequential tents, but we can't have everyone wanting specific kind of groups and subgroups. So it's just done down the list when we allocate it. But as we said before, we mix it up with different colour zones being kind of closer and further away, so you don't end up being kind of shoved out at the far end of the camping zone throughout the ride. And we also have some for those people who are on strikes to make sure they're able to be as close as possible to all the facilities. Let's see what else we've got in here. So some bike questions. So I'll probably hand over to you on this one. This is probably a webinar in itself. It says carbon road bike or steel touring bike. Both are set up with sufficient gears for climbing. Any view on that?
I think you've got to bring the bike that you feel most comfortable riding. As I said earlier, there'll be people on Dogma F12s and Colnago C64s right through to hybrid steel bikes with straight handlebars. And my advice is you ride the bike that you feel most comfortable with. But I would, the caveat, as I said earlier on, that some of the roads, we're on some big main roads which are very fast with good tarmac. Equally, we're on some small lanes to avoid busy roads, and they're less well maintained. So I think that's the answer to that question. You'll have to make that decision.
Yeah, I think it's a good shout. I think, Andy, if the medics are on here, they often talk about it's kind of comfort more than speed, because your body can be jolted around in a more kind of extreme racing position. All of that is putting additional strain on your body. So, I think that kind of general view of comfort over kind of raw speed is probably the one to go for if in doubt. SPD pedals or traditional road pedals. Again, this could probably be a kind of discussion in the pub, stretching long into the evening for certain people. But any kind of headlines on that one?
No, not really. Again, I think if you're prone to getting up and walking up and in the steep hills, then SPD, with a recessed plate is the way to go. But I think most people, would not be walking, and that'd be the only difference there. An SPD pedal or a road pedal equally is good. But if you're going to walk a bit, then maybe the SPD.
Yeah, sounds good. And the final one, this is kind of fairly specific, so we can go into some of this in more detail. Rear cassette ratios. Do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on your power, how strong you are, whether you're someone who is able to push a big gear, or whether you're someone who just likes to sit in the saddle and twiddle a very tiny gear at a high cadence. Again, it'll be personal preference. Most people would be fine with a compact chain set. That's a double chain ring at the front, running a 34 on the inside, 34 teeth on the inside, and running a 30 to 32 largest sprocket at the back. That would give you a pretty low gear. Someone's asked a question, I think, in the chat about a one by. A one by means that you've only got one chain wheel at the front, and there's a big crossover now on gravel bikes and road bikes to be fitted with long arm rear mechs, which means they can have a vast range of gears, and some of the sprockets at the back now are absolutely they're bigger than the chain wheels at the front, which gives you a very, very low gear. So if I'm telling people what I would ride, I think a 34 inside ring with a 32 to a 34 largest sprocket on the cluster at the back is ample. But there will be people who've got even bigger sprockets. I think the only thing I would say is that if you're in too low a gear, you're just going to be sitting there almost going nowhere. You can almost walk faster than you ride on it. So get used to riding the gears. Don't get hung up on hill climbing, ladies and gents. Some of the best hill climbers in the Tour de France come from Holland, not renowned for having lots of mountains. It's about the intensity that you're riding at. So, of course, practice hills because it's more about what's in your head and the fact you can get up the hills, but don't get hung up on doing lots of hill repeats necessarily. It's about the intensity that your training is performed at. Yeah.
Sounds good. We got some other ones coming in. So these are more, some of the more specific. So one of them is just around noise in the base camp. So the reality is we need to power these base camps, and we have them laid out as far as possible to keep any noisy infrastructure, things like generators, as far from the campsite as possible. The reality is it's not always that easy depending where you are in the base camp. The biggest noise factor is usually your fellow riders, and those noises range from the polite to remarkably impolite. So the overall message is bring earplugs. In terms of that, it's not the most glamorous noise management system. The technicality of the noise management system is we keep the noisy infrastructure as far away as possible from people sleeping. But even if we had totally silent generators, people zipping, unzipping tents, going to the loo, people snoring, people chatting on phones and things like that, the advice would be get good quality earplugs. Personal view is some people have quite expensive technologically designed ones, but equally the old-fashioned wax earplugs work really, really well. But yeah, if you're a light sleeper, or even if you're not, earplugs are definitely a good investment. We've got some more coming in around restrictions around luggage dimensions. I don't think we've got any formal restrictions around luggage dimensions. It's never been an issue in the past. I suppose I'd just make a plea for a degree of common sense. So yeah, maybe my 4 poster bed comment might come back to haunt me on the camping front. But yeah, there are no formal restrictions around luggage dimensions. But yeah, we'd tend to suggest like a soft bag. So again, that spare capacity you've got can compress down when we're loading vehicles, rather than a big, heavy solid case or something like that. In no particular order, I've just got them coming through on various things here. So how many riders are expected? So we'll have in the region of 1,000 riders on the event. That's usually a mix. We combine the full course riders, the England, the Scotland, and a handful of daily stages in there as well. But depending on how many dropouts we get on the event, it'll be around 1,000. There's another one here around the maximum gradient we experience. Andy, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, the steepest gradient that we experience is when we're in Scotland, when we leave the base camp at Strathdon. After about 10 miles of warming up, riding alongside the River Dee, we climb. My backdrop is the climb. It's called the Lect, and it's, I think, around about 20%, 22% at the steepest part of the bottom. So it's one of those climbs where a significant number of people get up and walk up. Once you got over the steep bit, it's stunning scenery up there. So that is probably the steepest on the whole route, that climb.
Yeah, I think that the hill climbing is an interesting one, because obviously, we'd go over some serious hills, and the Devon and Cornwall stages, it can be pretty relentless those first 2 days. Up, down, up, down, up, down, and some steep climbs in there as well. The from experience, far less accomplished cyclist than Andy, is the psychological element of hills can be a real blockage for people. They really get nervous about them, and that's the thing which defines their nervousness in the run up to the event. To the point around working on your weak points, if you're nervous about hills and you're nervous about what it's going to feel like going up some of those gradients, find somewhere in your local area where you can actually try out what that's like. Don't wait until the Lect to ride a 20% hill for the first time. The whole of the Lect isn't 20%, but there's a section of it there. But find somewhere near you, or if you're away for the weekend, stick your bike on the back of the car or on the train. Find areas where you can ride the equivalent of the bits you're nervous about, because this is all about overcoming these things which make you worried, and building that confidence in advance of the ride. It's like, if you're nervous about changing a puncture on the event, practice in your living room when it's nice and warm, get comfortable doing that, and then practice, even if you don't have one, practice changing tires at the end of a ride when you're cold and wet, you've got cold hands and things like that. Just write down the things you're nervous about. Write down the top 4 or 5 things you're nervous about on that ride, and then just think about how you can begin to tick them off, because nothing is that scary when you break it down. Andy's point around it's 9 days, but you break each one down to 35, 40 mile sections. Be honest with yourself about what's nerve-wracking, and then take those things on and tick them off. So when you get to the ride, there's nothing which you don't feel like you can get over with support of everyone around you. We've got another one here, quick one. How many people per tent? That's 1 per tent. So yeah, no need to share on those ones. They are 2-man tents. So you've got a bit more space in there. Here, bike cleaning facilities available, lubricant available, bring your own. I might check in just with Karen on the latest on that one.
Yeah, bike washing and cleaning is available, and we do have lube and various cleaning bits and bobs that you can use there. If you've got a real specific wish and you only want one type of variety, then bring your own.
Great, thanks, Kaza. We've got one here around detailed route files. So the GPX files are available on the Rider platform. Those are published already. So you can see literally turn by turn, gradient by gradient, what you're in for each day. One point which is really important to make on this is the route can change right the way up till, in some cases, the night before we ride it. The reality is, things don't stand still after Andy goes and does the route. So we're constantly looking at ways we can improve it. Roads deteriorate over the course of the year. So those files are there so you can get a really good idea of where we're planning on going, but they are subject to change as well. So don't, again, to this thing of preparing for the variations which can happen, don't get so locked in on those that any change is going to make you uncomfortable, because it happens every year. I remember one day 7 where it was a howling gale the night before. It was always going to be a tough day anyway. It was our biggest day on the old route, and there was a landslide. Was it the Crow Road, Andy, I think?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Come north out of Glasgow. So it went from being the big scary 125-mile day to pushing towards 140-mile day. So we've got to be prepared, event of this duration across these landscapes and these areas. As an organising team, we're constantly responding to what happens in the run-up and on that live event. So a long-winded way of saying the GPX files are there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are tweaks and adjustments if we think we can improve on that before the live event. But we'll obviously let you guys know if there's anything major within that. Looking at some other ones on here. So there's a question around base camp for previous night to be available once the event is finished. Can you return to Cardiff Sutherland prior to going home? We actually looked at this in the past, and we tried it one year, and then we decided it wasn't the right approach. So the Cardiff Sutherland base camp is not open to riders on that night you finish. So yeah, onward transport, there's various options which we kind of lay on. People have family come up and pick them up. There's trips back to Inverness. So Sophie, where's the best place to find a summary of the kind of onward travel options?
So the best place to have a look is the FAQs page of our website. That's sort of the same place that you'll find all of the bike and rider transport information from European Bike Express, but then also some tips and hints at travel to and from the event.
Great, thanks a lot. I think that again, one of those top tips actually, don't give yourself some extra time at the finish. It's an amazing place when you finally get to John O'Groats. Even regardless of whatever weather it's going to be up there, the feeling of arriving up in the far north, you're looking out across the Orkneys. Just checking my geography is correct. Yeah, looking up across the Orkneys, it's incredible landscapes. And sometimes what we find is people will tear across the finish line, throw their bike in a box and be on a bus home 5 minutes later, and you miss out on that kind of moment of reflection of what you will have achieved. Regardless of whether you want your picture taken at the sign or not, there's some incredible little bits of beaches, and working on it as a crew member and riding it, I've always kind of sought out like a little bit of that kind of secluded beach just to have a moment to reflect on the last 9 days before you kind of drop back into reality and normal life, because it is, people talk about the bubble. It's a very special chance to spend 9 days with this really single focused goal amongst all these other people. So if in doubt, book a shuttle an hour later or an hour and a half later, spend a bit more time there, reflect on your achievements, because you want to make the most of that moment you've earned. Looking at more questions, a quick one, rider numbers, have they been given? I don't believe they have yet. Any tips from Sophie or Kat? They haven't. Okay, head shaking. The final couple of quick ones here. I think we've covered most of the ones. So last year, so since the ride, we have tents laid out each day, and you go into the tent that you're allocated. Last year, because of COVID, we had the same tent each day, but it's incredibly complex and expensive to be able to do that because of effectively needing 2 entire sets of tents to do that because of the setup. So we're going back to how we always run the event beforehand. Again, this comes into one of those things where we talk about kind of rider etiquette, a group responsibility. So we ask everyone to clear their tent out fully before they kind of take the stuff out of it. Usually people are really good at that. And if someone opens their tent and they're not happy with it, we always have some spares so we can switch that out in no time at all. So yeah, it's going back to how we've done that historically. And I think that is pretty much it. Any more questions coming through? I can't see any on the Zoom chat, and I can't see any pinging up on the stuff off Facebook as well. So we'll probably leave it there for now. Like I said, we've got more webinars coming up later in the year, so please don't feel like you can only ask questions on this. We've got these webinars. Give us a call. You know, it's great. We're back in the office down in Brighton now, and it's always a treat when someone rings up and you can chat to them about the adventure they're on. So please do get in contact. It's all part of this, getting you guys as comfortable as possible by the time you arrive down in Land's End. And all the kind of key info is on the rider platform as well, so please go back and check on that. The final thing is probably just to remind you on Andy's training days, and any chances you can get to go out and join those groups. Can't kind of reinforce that enough. These are great to give you some structure around the ride, but if you can get out there on your bike alongside other people, particularly if they're preparing for this ride, is the best way of getting the miles in, especially when the weather's like it has been recently, which I can attest to. Having gone out on my bike this morning was absolutely miserable, but always worth it when you get back. Okay, well guys, that's it. Just to say thanks very much, Andy. Thanks very much, Karen, as well, and Sophie. And thanks also to everybody who dialed in. Like I said, it's a great sign that we've got a really healthy number of people kind of investing in their preparation for this. And so I hope it's been useful, and chat to lots of you soon. And it won't be too long before we're all down in Land's End. Personally, I cannot wait. All right, guys, thanks very much.